They told my kids to wait for the leftovers while my sister's kids ate first at the dining table with china plates, and I didn't say a word until later that night, when I tore our entire family apart. If that sounds dramatic, it's only because I'd been silent for so long. Claire's twins were still licking lasagna off their forks when I found Eli and Noah sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor, quietly eating peanut butter sandwiches like they'd been told not to ask questions. My mother smiled when I walked in, as if nothing was wrong. They didn't want pasta, she said casually, wiping her hands on her apron like she hadn't just humiliated my sons. They like simple food. I stood there frozen, lasagna cooling untouched on the stove, while my stomach turned. Eli wouldn't meet my eyes. Noah whispered, "It's okay, Mom." It wasn't okay. It had never been okay. I smiled then, a smile so tight it hurt, and excused us early. No scene, no confrontation, just a perfectly polite exit while my entire body trembled with rage. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share, your support keeps the stories coming. That night, Malcolm didn't say a word when I sat on the edge of our bed and cried, my fists clenched so hard my nails left half-moons in my palms. He just pulled me in, and for once, I didn't try to explain it away. Because there was no misunderstanding. It was clear. It had always been clear, I just refused to see it. That my family didn't see my children as equal. That the love they offered me came with terms. That I had been their safety net, their fixer, their emotional accountant and ATM machine since I was 25, and they felt entitled to it. My parents, Gerald and Linda, and my sister Claire, had this unspoken arrangement where I played the role of the responsible one. The one who had made it. The one who owed. And I did owe. Or at least I believed I did, because they told me I did. Reminded me of it constantly. "We raised you," they said when I hesitated to co-sign their mortgage. "We didn't have much, but we gave you everything." So I signed. And then I gave. $141,000 in loans. Gifts, bailouts, college funds for Claire's kids. Car repairs for my parents. Vacation money when things got tight, groceries when Linda forgot her wallet, checks slipped quietly into birthday cards marked, "Just a little help." And every time I tried to pull back, they reminded me that family helps family. Every single time. Until that lasagna night. That night I saw it for what it was. It wasn't about help. It was control. Claire's kids were fed and fussed over. Mine were fed last and forgotten. That night broke something in me, and unlocked something else entirely. The next morning, I let my mother's call go to voicemail, already knowing the script. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice trembling in that performative way she'd perfected over decades. "We need your help with the mortgage again. The payment's due next week. We'll lose the house if you don't pitch in. How could you do this to us?" I didn't answer. I sat at the kitchen counter while Malcolm made coffee, and when he looked at me with that gentle, steady gaze and asked, "You okay?" I repeated the words my therapist and I had practiced for weeks. "No error, Dad. Just boundaries." The sentence felt like biting into something I'd avoided all my life, only to find I loved the taste. "I'm better than okay," I told him, and I meant it. Until the doorbell rang. Noah sprinted to answer before I could stop him. "Auntie Claire." He shouted with pure joy, and my stomach clenched like I'd been punched. Claire stepped into my home like she owned it. No hello. No warning. Just a tight smile and a cold voice. "Jacqueline, we need to talk. This has gone far enough." I sent the boys to the other room and closed the door behind them. "You can't just show up at my home," I said, keeping my voice even. "I tried your office. Your assistant was rude. Said you were in meetings all day. Taylor had warned me, your sister's here. Should I call security?" I'd told her no. I should have said yes. "You went to my workplace?" I asked. "Seriously?" Claire crossed her arms. "Family comes first. You used to understand that." I laughed then, not kindly. "Family comes first? Is that why my kids ate on the floor while yours got lasagna and the good dishes?" She flushed, caught. "That was just one time. You're being dramatic." Mom explained. "Get out," I said. Calm, cold, final. She blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my house." Malcolm appeared beside me, his body language unshakable. "It's time to leave, Claire." And for the first time, she actually did. After she left, something shifted. The house felt lighter. That night, we ordered pizza, a rare treat on a weeknight, and sat on the floor with the boys watching movies and laughing. Real laughter. No tension in their shoulders, no questions about why Grandma doesn't hug them like she hugs Connor, or why they have to be extra polite when we visit. Later, after they were in bed, I opened my phone to 43 missed calls and texts. Uncle Robert accusing me of abandoning the family. Cousin Jennifer suggesting I was having a mental health episode. An anonymous post in the community Facebook group. What kind of daughter walks away from her aging parents? I scrolled in silence until Malcolm pulled me back to earth. "You know what I noticed tonight?" he said. "What?" I asked. "You're standing taller." And I didn't even realize I was. The tears came, not from pain, but relief. And that's when I started documenting everything. The financial records. The emotional manipulation. The loans that weren't loans. The emergencies that always aligned with vacation dates or school enrollment deadlines. 9 years of spreadsheets. My journal became armor. My memory sharpened. And when Linda texted to ask for a coffee meeting at Copperleaf, the neutral ground, I agreed. But I was ready this time. She arrived 15 minutes late, with just the right amount of red in her eyes. Not so much that she looked unhinged, just enough to trigger sympathy from the people around us. She sat across from me, her voice soft and maternal. "You know how people talk," she said. "We're just trying to keep things comfortable." I pressed record on my phone. "Comfortable how?" "You know," she said. "Mixed families. We're just helping the boys learn to navigate." I pushed my phone across the table. "Say it again." Clearly. Her face turned pale. "You're recording me?" "Yes. Say exactly what you meant about my kids being different." She stood, furious. "This is an ambush. Then leave." And she did. But the spell was broken. I removed myself from their accounts. I stopped every automatic transfer. I took back my time, my money, my life. Claire showed up again, this time at my office, but Taylor intercepted her and Diane called security. At school, Eli and Noah met with the counselor, who gently helped them unpack the confusion they hadn't yet found the words for. "They're more resilient than you think," she told me. And they were. We were. Especially when Malcolm's parents invited us to dinner. Joyce hugged the boys without hesitation. Thomas showed them how to sand wood in his garage like they were his own blood. I watched from the doorway as love, real, unconditional, soft-spoken love, wrapped around my kids in a way they'd never known. And then came the final break. I showed up at my parents' house unannounced, 20 minutes early to a meeting they thought they'd arranged on their terms. I used the spare key they didn't know I still had. And I heard them talking. "Jacqueline always gets so dramatic," Linda sighed. "The boys are sweet, but life's going to be hard for them. Better they learn now." Claire added, "At least she still sends money. She's our safety net." And then my father, said the words that turned my blood to ice: "The mixed ones will always be different. It's just reality." I stepped into the room, hit record, and held my phone up. "Tell me more about the mixed ones, Dad." "I'm listening." The air in the room cracked like glass. They tried to backtrack. To gaslight. To blame society. But I laid the spreadsheets on the table, $141,000 in black and white. I laid my terms on the table. No more money. No more contact. No more guilt. Malcolm walked in minutes later and played the recording again, this time his. "The mixed ones will always be different." That was their voice. Their truth. And I finally had the power to walk away. I thought cutting ties would bring silence, but the noise only got louder. Within a week of walking out of my parents' house for the last time, I became the villain in a story I hadn't written. The community grapevine ignited like wildfire, fed by my mother's careful sobs and Claire's crocodile tears. I was the ungrateful daughter, the one who had abandoned her parents after everything they'd sacrificed. Gerald and Linda didn't mention the $141,000 I'd given them. They didn't mention the racist remarks caught on tape. They didn't mention the lasagna that never reached my son's plates. Eli sat no, they only told the parts that made me look cruel, unstable, selfish. Linda cried to her church friends, clutching tissues and murmuring about my emotional breakdown, while Gerald claimed Malcolm had turned me against my family. Claire started showing up to places I frequented, grocery stores, the kids' school parking lot, even my gym. Always smiling, always saying just loud enough for others to hear, "We're praying for her. Families go through hard times." She cornered one of my coworkers at a conference luncheon and said I was struggling with anger issues. I didn't find out until my boss pulled me into her office to ask if everything at home was okay. That's when I realized, they weren't just smearing my name, they were trying to isolate me. To ruin my credibility. To break me. But I didn't bend. I hired a lawyer. Froze all joint accounts. Filed paperwork to remove my name from their mortgage. Malcolm and I installed a security system and notified the kids' school to alert us if anyone outside our approved list came near them. I knew it sounded extreme, but I also knew my family. When manipulation didn't work, they escalated. And sure enough, it came. 2 weeks after I served legal notice, I got a call from Child Protective Services. An anonymous tip had been made claiming my home was unsafe, that Malcolm was verbally aggressive, and that our children were frequently left alone while their parents worked excessive hours. I knew exactly who had done it. There were only 3 people in the world who had ever used those exact phrases, and they all shared my blood. The CPS agent, to her credit, was respectful and professional. She asked to see the boys. Spoke to them privately. Walked through our home. Saw the fridge full, the rooms clean, the schoolwork displayed on the fridge, the family photos lining the walls. She left with a polite smile and no further action. But the violation lingered. My children were interviewed like suspects because my parents couldn't control me anymore. That night, I cried, not out of fear, but rage. And Malcolm, sitting across from me at our dining table, slid a folder toward me. "I've been keeping records too," he said. Inside were screenshots, emails, receipts, proof of subtle sabotage stretching back years. The time Gerald accidentally contacted Malcolm's client and questioned his credentials. The time Linda mistakenly sent Malcolm's resume to a friend with a warning that he had a temper. These were not isolated missteps. They were patterns. And now, patterns had consequences. I added them to the folder with my own documents, the recordings, the bank transfers, the messages from Claire demanding her share of the support I gave our parents. My therapist called it generational trauma. I called it war. And I was done fighting for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. So I built my own. We started over, completely. New financial boundaries. No more last-minute babysitting requests. No more dropping everything because Linda had a cold or Claire's sitter cancelled or Gerald needed a quick look at his taxes. My family went nuclear in response. Claire emailed my department head, suggesting I had a drinking problem. My mother sent a mass family email with screenshots of old texts she'd twisted out of context to paint me as erratic. Gerald called Malcolm's mother and tried to warn her about family instability. But every move they made only exposed their desperation. And I kept living. Quietly, intentionally, fully. Malcolm and I took the boys on their first proper vacation, a week in Oregon hiking, eating pancakes in small-town diners, watching the boys discover tide pools and see stars like they were magic. For the first time, Eli stopped grinding his teeth at night. Noah no longer asked me every morning, "Are we going to see Grandma today?" Like it was a coin toss. They just woke up, played, laughed, lived. The change was so visible, even my colleagues noticed. "You seem lighter," one said during a staff meeting. "Like something's been lifted." It had. And that's when the letters started. Handwritten. From my father. The first simply said, "I'm sorry you feel hurt. I never meant to cause pain." I didn't respond. The second came a week later, "I miss my grandsons. I know I've made mistakes. Can we talk? Just me and you." Again, I stayed silent. The third came addressed to Malcolm, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong. You're a good man. A good father. I see that now." That one made me pause. Because Malcolm, who had never demanded anything from them, who had stood quietly beside me through every storm, held that letter in his hands for a long time. Then folded it and said, "If he's serious, he'll say it to my face." And eventually, Gerald did. 6 months after the CPS call, Malcolm came home early from work. His face unreadable. "Your dad wants to meet for coffee," he said, setting his keys down slowly. "Just me." I sat frozen. "You don't have to, I want to," he said. "But no forgiveness unless it's real." They met at a neutral cafe near the university. Malcolm came home, quiet. I waited. "He apologized," he said finally. "Not just for what he said. For how he treated me. The boys. You. He said he's been going to some kind of bias group since the downsizing. Said it made him see things differently." I didn't believe it. Not at first. But then Linda called. And for the first time in years, she didn't ask for anything. "We want to try family counseling," she said, her voice lower than usual. "Not because of money. Not because of holidays. Because we were wrong. Jackie. I was wrong. I didn't agree right away. I made my terms clear, no contact with the boys until we saw sustained effort. No manipulation. No deflection. They could come to therapy, but I wouldn't play the peacemaker anymore. Either they were all in, or they were all out." "Understood," she said. And for once, she meant it. The first few sessions were rough. Claire rolled her eyes. Gerald deflected with humor. Linda cried, but mostly for herself. But I didn't back down. I brought receipts. Spoke truths I'd buried for decades. And slowly, something cracked open. Gerald began to listen. Not just sit through it, listen. He apologized without qualifiers. Owned his words. Linda began asking questions, not loaded ones, but curious, real ones. "What do I say when people make comments like that?" she asked Malcolm one night. "How do I interrupt it without freezing up?" Malcolm gave her real answers. Patiently. Because he saw something in them I didn't yet. Effort. Claire was slower. She cried. She defended. She accused me of revenge. But even she showed up, week after week. And then one night, after a particularly brutal session, she texted me, "I think I've been jealous of you since we were kids. I'm sorry I took that out on your family." I didn't respond. But I didn't block her either. Progress. 3 months in, we had dinner together. Not at a country club. Not at their house. A mid-range diner near my office. Everyone paid their own bill. No one complained about the prices. Gerald helped Noah understand the menu. Linda praised Eli's new sketchbook. And for once, my boys didn't look like they were waiting for something to go wrong. When the check came, Claire said, "I've got mine," and actually meant it. We walked to the parking lot in silence, the boys racing ahead to the car, laughing about something that had happened at school. Linda touched my arm. "Thank you for giving us another chance." I looked her dead in the eye. "It's not for you. It's for them." She followed my gaze to where my sons stood, bathed in streetlight. They deserve grandparents who see all of them. And for the first time, I think she understood. But the past still sat with me, heavy. I hadn't forgiven them. Not fully. But I was watching. And they knew that now. Knew the rules had changed. My love wasn't up for barter. My boundaries weren't negotiable. And the power they'd once held was gone. I had reclaimed it, not through vengeance, but truth. And that was more powerful than anything they could have imagined. 1 year later. I sat at Riverside Grill with the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic floating through the air, and for the first time in over a decade, my shoulders weren't tight, my chest wasn't braced, and my eyes didn't scan the room for emotional ambush. The round table buzzed with the easy rhythm of family, real family. Not the kind held together by guilt or hierarchy, but one that had been rebuilt, brick by brick, boundary by boundary. Apology by painful apology. Next to Gerald, animatedly describing his latest art project. Waving his arms so wide his fork almost flew across the table. But Gerald didn't flinch, he just chuckled and leaned in like Eli's joy was the only thing that mattered. That's talent. "Buddy," he said with sincerity so even I couldn't find a crack in it. "You'll have to show me how to paint those trees sometime. No hidden barbs, no forced pleasantries. Just a grandfather asking his grandson to teach him something." Across from them, Linda peppered Noah with questions about his baseball season, listening like every word was gold. "And you caught it at the fence?" "Really?" she gasped. Noah puffed up, his back straight with pride instead of anxiety. "Coach says I track the ball really well. Better than the older kids." I didn't jump in to translate or affirm. I didn't need to. She saw him now. Fully. At the kids' table, Claire's twins and my boys traded jokes and fries, their laughter overlapping without a single eye roll or backhanded remark. And Claire, who once fought tooth and nail to remain the star of every room, simply smiled, watching them with a softness that used to be buried under a mountain of resentment. She was different now. Not perfect, not fully healed, but different. She had a full-time job, paid her own rent. Stopped texting me passive-aggressive memes about family obligations. She didn't ask me for favors anymore. And when I offered to help with her resume last month, she said, "Only if you really have the time," and meant it. We had gone from codependence to mutual respect, a miracle I'd have laughed at a year ago. When the server brought the checks, he didn't even ask who was paying. He just placed separate folders in front of each adult, because he'd seen us here enough to know, this family splits the bill now. Claire didn't wait for anyone. She slid her card in, caught my eye, and said, "I've got mine." No theater. No guilt. Just equality. Malcolm looked over at me, the edge of a smile playing on his lips. "You stand taller now," he said under his breath, his hand finding mine beneath the table, warm and sure. I squeezed his fingers gently. "I finally know my worth." Because I did. I knew it in my bones. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the scapegoat or the wallet or the fallback plan. I was a woman who drew a line in the sand and dared her whole family to meet her on the other side. And somehow, astonishingly, they had. Not because I begged. Not because I compromised. But because I stopped making myself small. Outside in the cool evening air, while the kids zipped up their jackets and raced to the parking lot, Linda pulled me aside. Her face was calm, not rehearsed. "Losing your support," she said quietly, "was the best thing that happened to us. It forced us to see what mattered. And what didn't." I studied her for a long second. "I still have the folder," I said. "The financial records. The recordings. The screenshots." Her eyes didn't flinch. "You should keep them. You were right to protect yourself." That was new. That was earned. In the rearview mirror on the drive home, Eli whispered something that made Noah collapse into giggles. Their laughter filled the car, that free, unguarded kind of laugh that only comes from kids who feel safe. Who know they are loved without condition. Who aren't measuring their worth against empty plates or adult expectations. I looked at Malcolm, his face relaxed, his hand steady on my leg. The best investment I ever made, I said, watching the boys, was teaching them that respect can't be bought, and love doesn't come with strings. He glanced at me, eyes warm. And you taught them that by living it. Because that's what this had been, a slow, excruciating, soul-rebuilding unraveling of everything I was taught family meant. I was raised to believe love required sacrifice, that good daughters made themselves available and invisible at the same time. That silence was safety. That speaking up made you ungrateful. But I taught my children something else, that love without respect is control, that family without boundaries is a trap, and that peace, real peace, is worth the price of 1,000 ruptures. Gerald, to his credit, kept going to his unconscious bias group. Once a month, sometimes more. He sent me articles now. We didn't always agree on them, but he tried. And more importantly, he didn't expect applause for trying. Linda met with Malcolm's mother for coffee every few weeks now. They swapped recipes and stories about the boys. She even asked if she could borrow a book I'd mentioned in therapy. The one about reparenting yourself, she said. I think I need to do that. It wasn't performative. I could tell. There was a new quietness in her, a willingness to listen instead of spin. Claire still slipped sometimes, her old tongue creeping into texts or her eyes narrowing when someone praised my kids a little too much, but she caught herself now. Owned it. Apologized. And that, more than perfection, was what I'd always needed. Accountability. In therapy, we talked about repair. About how real healing isn't neat or quick. It's messy and slow and full of regression. But every week they showed up was a small miracle. And slowly, we stitched something new together, not a replica of what was, but something stronger because it had been broken. At night, I'd sometimes reread old journal entries from before the rupture, the ones where I detailed the slights. The insults, the way my children were being chipped away piece by people who claimed to love them. And I'd weep. Not out of sadness, but release. Because those words weren't true anymore. That reality wasn't ours anymore. My boys knew now, without question, that their worth wasn't dependent on approval. They didn't flinch around their grandparents. They didn't ask me if their brown skin made them less welcome. They didn't worry about who got served first. They just lived. They just laughed. And that, more than anything, was my victory. I never got a formal apology from Claire for the years she stole attention and framed herself as the victim while I paid her bills. I didn't need one. Her actions now speak more loudly than her past excuses. She volunteers at the boys' school twice a month. She offered to help Malcolm prep for a fundraiser. She said, with no hint of sarcasm, "You're good at building things." I admire that. And I believed her. Because she was finally learning what I had known all along, respect isn't owed by birthright, it's earned. At Thanksgiving, we hosted. By choice. Malcolm grilled, the kids made place cards, and everyone brought a dish without calling to ask what I was making first. At the table, Gerald gave a short toast. He didn't make himself the center. He didn't cry or apologize again. He just raised his glass and said, to learning better. And doing better. And that was enough. Because finally, he was. In the quiet moments after the guests left, when the kids were tucked in and the dishwasher hummed in the background, I curled up next to Malcolm on the couch. "Do you think this is real?" I asked. He looked at me, thoughtful. "I think it's real enough to believe in. And if it ever stops being real, you'll see it. And we'll deal with it." I nodded. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of losing them. Not of conflict. Not of starting over. I had already done the hardest thing, taught myself that peace is more important than approval. That my children's joy matters more than anyone's comfort. That I am not responsible for who they choose to be, only for who I allow into our lives. And so when people ask me how I fixed my family, I tell them the truth, I didn't. I stopped trying. I stopped fixing and started expecting. I made my standards known and let them rise, or fall, on their own. The ones who loved me rose. The ones who couldn't, faded. I didn't win because they changed. I won because I did. I won because I protected my peace like it was sacred. I won because I chose truth over tradition. Because I stopped giving away pieces of myself for scraps of validation. And now, when I hear my sons laugh, free and loud and unburdened, I know, this is what breaking the cycle sounds like.